Fantastic. Well, good afternoon. I'm Ken here at the Theosophy Lodge in San Diego, Ken Campos. So then, to get ready for today, again, spiritual attention beyond mindfulness. I have a short reading from Zen Master Dogen, and you can see it here in the blue. To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things of the universe. To be enlightened by all things of the universe is to cast off the body and mind of the self, as well as those of others. Even the traces of enlightenment are wiped out, and life with traceless enlightenment goes on forever and ever. With that, let me bring up to our lectern here our esteemed and anonymous speaker, Ken Small. Ken, take it away.
Ken. Thank you, Ken. So that was it. That was the lecture, the quote from Dogen. Everyone should be laughing out there, I hope.
Yeah.
Adding anything will only create confusion and distort the picture, I'm afraid. So I started to prepare a more elaborate presentation with paradigms and comparisons and more analysis and all those things. And then I thought that it didn't really work out very well in my mind. Really, the focus of the topic is spiritual attention. And then I added the intentionally a little bit provocative subtitle, Beyond Mindfulness, in terms of the current popularized, mostly Western mindfulness, cognitive neuroscience, etc. So most important in what I want to try to convey today is how spiritual attention is rooted in our view with a capital V, and how this view is more important even than any particular meditation method we may engage in. Yeah, and then I'll just fix this so I don't drop it. Okay. These are things we barely bring into our day-to-day conscious awareness too much. But our essential view of life is what provides the basis of our life direction. We may choose with our more ego consciousness, we're going to do this or that. But underneath that is this much deeper perspective. And the whole point of bringing up the idea is view is how do we clarify view? And really a great deal of the study of any of the inner traditions, the esoteric studies within theosophy, has to do with clarifying view. What is our relationship on the great themes of life and death, relationship to the cosmos? All these key issues are clarifying view. So I mean view in this larger sense, not like looking out the window exactly, but looking out the deep window within and out into the inner and outer cosmos. So as we become more aware of this deeper spiritual view, the smaller details of our daily living follow this vertical impulse. So we're looking at this as the vertical dimension, symbolically, the spiritual meditational direction. And there's a very many decades ago, rather eccentric friend was living in a cooperative household I was managing. He was actually a Benedictine, ordained Benedictine. And his uncle, who was the actually head of the Benedictine monastery in Oceanside, very forceful character. He grew up in rural Kentucky, Appalachia, and Reverend Neil Voigt was quite a character, but he would forcefully say, Neil, be sure you know where you are placing your ladder before you start climbing all the way to the top and you get in the wrong place. Well, this has to do with view. You know, we can climb many ladders in life, and we all have. And how often do they end up not quite where we thought they were going? And I don't mean just the outer ones, but also the inner ones. So again, view is very pivotal. View is central to our understanding of our whole life pattern. So how do we consider and choose the view to follow? Or do we choose it? How does it choose us? And what is this spiritual view, and how is it the substratum of our daily living? How does this vertical dimension of a spiritual view integrate into our daily life? So foundations of this view can be outlined as follows. We can look at the interdependence and unity of life, how this interdependence fosters universal responsibility and compassion, which provides the basis for ethical conduct rooted in compassion for all living beings. This evolves out of a deep view rather than being composed of details that we try and manufacture and put together. In the theosophical, esoteric, and many inner traditions, this view is something intrinsic. It's not something we fabricate. So we can see it popularized as the butterfly effect concept in chaos theory that illustrates how small changes in initial conditions can lead to vastly different outcomes in complex systems. I'm going to use the example of what's called the jewel net of Indra from Huayan Buddhism in China, which provides a metaphoric symbol of this greater paradigm within which to expand our view. So Indra's net is based on the Avatamsaka Sutra, or Flower Adornment Sutra of Mahayana Buddhism, attributed to Dushun in the 6th century, first patriarch of Huayan Buddhism in China. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, the reality is described as perfectly interpenetrating. Each individual phenomena not only perfectly reflects all other phenomena, but also the ultimate nature of existence. The cosmic Buddha Vairocana pervades all things and is the ground of being, and all phenomena emanate from Vairocana. A later Huayan teacher, Fatsang, illustrated Indra's net by placing 8 mirrors around a statue of the Buddha. 4 mirrors around, 1 above and 1 below. He then placed a candle to illuminate the central Buddha, with the resulting symbol of the mirrors reflecting the Buddha and each other's reflection in an endless inter-reflecting series. Thus, all beings and phenomena arise within the same ground of being and are within and interconnected with everything. Francis Cook, in his book on Huayan Buddhism, writes, "Far away in the heavenly abode of the great god Indra, there's a wonderful net which has been hung by some cunning artificer in such a manner that it stretches out infinitely in all directions. In accordance with the extravagant tastes of deities, the artificer has hung a single glittering jewel in each eye of the net. And since the net itself is infinite in dimension, the jewels are infinite in number. There hang the jewels, glittering like stars in the first magnitude, a wonderful sight to behold. If we now arbitrarily select one of these jewels for inspection and look closely at it, we will discover that in its polished surface, there are reflected all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel is also reflecting all the other jewels, so that there is an infinite reflecting process occurring. Thus, each individual is at once the cause for the whole and is caused by the whole. And what is called existence is a vast body made up of an infinity of individuals, all sustaining each other and defining each other. The cosmos is, in short, a self-creating, self-maintaining, and self-defining organism. So Huayan gives the view that everyone and everything is the entire greater whole and simultaneously one's self, a view of interdependent non-dualism. This Gestalt understanding of reality in which each part contains the whole is often compared to a multidimensional hologram. Another symbolic metaphor from Huayan is called the golden statue of a lion. In each of the lion's eyes, in its ears, limbs, and so forth, down to each and every hair, there is a golden lion. All the lions embraced by each and every hair simultaneously and instantaneously enter into one single hair. Thus, in each and every hair, there are an infinite number of lions. The progression is infinite, like the jewels of celestial Lord Indra's net. A realm embracing realm ad infinitum is thus established and is called the realm of Indra's net. The image and symbol of Indra's net can be seen as a wonder-filled contemplative tool to help the spiritual wayfarer establish a greater view conducive to spiritual meditation, of which mindfulness then becomes a subset. So all our core elements come from shifting this kind of view. Even how I experience my daily life, whether it's a sunset, a flower, meeting a friend, doing the dishes, or talking to a group of people here today. Mm-hmm. All this involves the interdependent nature of Indra's net. And then the deeper question of who am I within this view of the interconnectedness of all life? This also shifts our view of ideas of karma, for example. Someone might say, oh, why did that happen to me? Ouch. Or happy, or sad, or all these things of which we are extolled today to be mindful. But whose are they? In this dimension of spiritual attention is a much bigger cosmos of events happening within us, So in this expanded view, the limited ego releases its ownership. And quite surprisingly, the ups and downs of life move on very easily. Or maybe easily is not quite the right word. More simply. Paradigms of the unity of life can be found throughout the world's wisdom traditions. These paradigms of consciousness give the wayfarer roadmaps that are beneficial to outline the journey of the inner life. The challenge remains for the wayfarer to engage the view and bring alive the small hints and traces of the view to gradually make it real in one's experience. This is centrally important to make the inner effort of awareness to move from mere cognitive analysis to spiritual awakening and contemplation. The small, sometimes missed or undervalued aha moments are the sparks that give pause to the superficial, outer-oriented mental constructs and open the door to a deeper inner life? Are there symptoms of this inner movement? A greater sense of interconnectedness and service to the whole opens the door to appreciate the moments in daily life of more presence, capital P, synchronistic happenings, and pinpricks of sudden greater awareness. These moments come with joyful equanimity and spontaneous release of our limited self into something unknown and greater.
And can someone wondered if the slides were to advance?
The slides will come in a moment.
Okay.
Thank you, yes. These slides, I had again started to do a slide presentation, and then I reinvented this narrative with just a few slides. This was as part of the introduction. Going back again, I like to quote or requote. Again, when taking the definitive meaning into experience, do not rely upon the ordinary dualistic mind that chases after words and concepts, but rely upon non-dual wisdom itself. Rely on the message of the teacher, not the personality. Rely on the meaning, not just the words. Rely on the real meaning, not on the provisional one. And most important, rely on your wisdom mind, not your ordinary judgmental mind. This was a installation in the Gladstone Hotel in Toronto. Julnath of Indra, 1,000 acrylic mirrors with 325 acrylic painted portraits. Quite extraordinary, really. Quite wonderful to see these ideas being expressed in artistic and creative forms in our modern world today. I think we can pause and do some, take maybe one question, or Ken, do you want to have a comment on just the idea of view? We will try to move forward in an overview from view and then meditation and then ethical conduct.
Yes. Would you say, Ken, that this word view is analogous to the idea of a mindset or maybe a philosophical position about the nature of the world and reality?
Yes, I think you would want to add to that it has something more than conceptual, though, to make, it also involves an experiential element.
Mm-hmm.
It involves this kind of notion of view is the kind of notion of view that it's like, oh, I never thought of that before.
Mm-hmm.
The aha moment, like, oh, that's what that means,
Mm-hmm.
So it's where we break out of our conceptual constructs, and there's some kind of we would say higher impulse, or something carries us, then it's like, oh, like I thought of that for 20 years, I never understood it, and now, and you still can't define it, but it's changed.
Yes, and I think certainly this view concept of the interdependence and the interpenetration, if you will, of every being is the place that I think Blavatsky is trying to move towards that direction, or kind of pointing the direction to the finger, saying that we have this delusion of separateness.
Yes, right.
View. We have a delusion of separateness as our view.
Yeah,
so really an incorrect view.
Yeah, the great heresy of separateness and that kind of language, And here the Julnath of Indra is putting that in like this positive framework.
It's me, Ken. Thank you for that intro. Just love the imagery associated with Indra's net. It's so evocative, and of course, it's very ancient. You find it in the Hindu tradition as well. In fact, I think it has its origin there, right? In the Vedas, yeah. But I this when you started talking about view, I immediately went to the Four Noble Truths, where the first step on the Noble Eightfold Path is that of right view. And you can imagine, for example, someone being inspired to enter onto the Buddhist path that would not be able to make a beginning without having some grasp of what the Buddha taught. What is the Four Noble Truths? And what is the Noble Eightfold Path? Does one have even an intellectual grasp, a conceptual grasp of what that is? And without that, as a beginning step, how can you move to further stages of deeper intuitive understanding, a deeper penetration of the truths being spoken of, and so on? So I was just wondering if you think that's one way to think about right view also, isn't just in terms of that initial effort to gain a conceptual grasp of what the teaching is. What is the teaching?
Yes, I totally agree. They go hand in hand. I think, I think it's maybe in a footnote. I wish I had it in front of me. It's the Voice of the Silence, where Blavatsky also mentions, of course, the Four Noble Truths, and then she spins it around in that footnote, and says, of course, they aren't really there. Do you have that, Jonathan? Do you remember? I should quote it exactly, because otherwise I'll get in trouble here.
I thought it in the middle of both.
It's in the middle, yeah. Anyway,
I'll find it.
but to point out, if you don't have the first part, you can't go past to the next part. Quite right. And these are, a lot of we have to be careful in that these are very profound teachings that guide us and are true in the sense that they are skillful means.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say life is suffering, well, I experience pain. We have bodies. We all experience pain. Anyone not experience pain? But in the Buddhist sense, how does this turn into suffering? All life is impermanent, transitory. So we experience impermanence often as this sense of transitory nature of things means there's some loss. But this is based on how the I is attached to the object. Mm-hmm. Intrinsically, what is lost? Mm-hmm. Only the problem is at least as I understand it, is the attachment. I'm pausing so everyone can kind of settle, So this issue arises, and then in this present moment, in anyone's meditation, in this absolute present moment, and maybe there's some people with experience, even working with people going through great pain in the process of dying or other things, But in the absolute present moment, where is the suffering? This is just in not a theoretical sense, but in our actual experiential sense. So this pain even dissolves in the present moment. So this is why and how engaging in the practice of this view becomes so pivotal and important. But I'm kind of getting carried away, maybe. Any other comments or things?
Is this the section you're talking about or not?
We'll come back to that. Anyway.
Laura has her hand up.
Laura?
Was intrigued by the opening statement of the fact beyond mindfulness, you know, that spiritual awareness.
Yes.
And, you know, that is such a beautiful thing to contemplate. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure, but maybe this idea of beyond mindfulness is taking hold of our own process of becoming, our own process of awakening through mindfulness rather than mindfulness itself. I wondered if you could speak to that or what that means.
Yeah. Through mindfulness, that's a good way to take a look at this. Yeah, I mean, even in the most mundane sense, without some degree of mindfulness, we won't do well shopping for our groceries tomorrow, you know? So this is very important. You know, in this, it's in the very iconoclastic mode. The voice of the silence begins with, you know, the mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciples slay the slayer. And it's rather Zen-like. And of course, the footnote adds that means the Kama monastic mind. Okay, well, and then how do we manifest the higher mind, you know, through this vehicle in the relative sense, really shift the paradigm? So that's where, you know, view assists us in a way in which to encompass this wider vision of things. Like even again, back to the subject of suffering, you know, in the Tibetan Buddhist application of a bodhisattva practice, they have the practice of Tonglen, or equalizing self and other, as it's often called. So in that practice, one is actually visualizing, taking in the suffering of others and sending out positive healing and compassionate energy to the recipient. This is a very wonderful practice, and this also shifts our center of focus on the transitory nature of our ego, our I, not the reincarnating ego, but our limited ego. And again, as you say, you know, it's like the opens up the dimension of this higher becoming to this greater sense of a larger self or selfless self. You know, language gets a little tricky here. You know? Any other comments?
To that end, you mentioned suffering, but what is it within us that does not suffer? Is there something in, you know, what is that? How can we understand that position of not suffering that is also there within us?
Yes, exactly. You know, this is the core sense in this deeper, more universal view. Where is suffering exactly, really? Or is there suffering even? And in the deeper again contemplating the nature of karma, as the equilibrium of the universe, not as some kind of vengeful or retaliatory thing, but as the equilibrium of the universe. This is the balance center of the universe. So this is in the intrinsic nature of things. These are very deep questions. They just sit with us, there's not like answers exactly, I remember some 25 years ago, maybe, or so. At that time, I had a bookstore as opposite one of the alternative cinemas in San Diego. And there was a Tibetan film playing on some of the current problems in Tibet. And people were waiting outside talking, and much to everyone's surprise, some Tibetan visitors were there, but someone else happened to be in town who was the Dalai Lama's personal physician, Dr. Dandin, who had spent something like 30 years in prison in Tibet. And someone asked him, "How did you get through that?" We were standing right there, someone said, "How did you get out of this thing?" And he had the most kind of deep serenity. And he said, "Karma. Understanding karma." That was very profound. I mean, it's like, anyway, I just,
That's a beautiful example. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Again, this is like in this deeper dimensions of view is also the view of this deeper dimension of karma. And again, karma is the basis that we have the idea of Indra's net. Without, this is a profound view of karma. Is Indra's net, is this interdependence of everything. Oh, good. Yes. Oh, David.
I was thinking not only young people, but all people, really, all of us want to feel a real purpose in life, that not only our life has meaning, but we're doing something worthwhile for the whole. So I'm wondering if a young person comes to a lodge meeting, say, with just that question: what does theosophy offer? How can I find a deeper purpose or direction in my life to live it day to day? What would theosophy offer?
This is a question?
That's the question.
Oh, my.
If someone came up to you or me, it doesn't have to. We don't have to go to the secret necessarily to get the answer.
How to be at home in the universe, in the living universe. There's not a particle of the endless space, outwardly or inwardly, that isn't alive.
Mhm.
I mean, even in the contemplative vision of the early Huayan Buddhists, they saw infinite worlds within their idea of atoms that were filled with Buddha worlds. Quite amazing, This is amazing, and what a wonderful, extraordinary world if we got even a tiny hint of that. As in William Blake's, we see eternity in a grain of sand, eternity in the hour. wasn't just a poetic metaphor, he meant it very literally. Or as Blake said also, you know, again, using Western language sometimes is good. Eternity is in love with the productions of time. You know, or the great Japanese Zen philosopher Nishida said the very fact that an object appears, there's the subject of self and object of other, is the, and then the coming to get that is experienced means there is also the union of that seeming subject object. That mere subject object coming together is the love of the universe. So ultimately, the view that all phenomena arise are part of an awakened universe, actually. Only our misperception detracts from this wonderment in the present. And we get glimpses of that in moments, you know. So, you know, everyone does a little bit here and there. And then actually it's there all the time, but we get in the way.
So how do we bring that down, you know, to the everyday, to the person that walks into the lodge? You know, you remind me what you said. I agree with, but you know, it's been said it's not so hard to love the universe. It's more difficult to love your neighbor.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, this has to be we have to seize the moment in that practice. You know.
But I'm still wondering, theosophically speaking, what can one offer the person who walks in, you know, hungry and looking?
I think the first off is that we have to offer very deep listening to really hear what the person is looking for in a very authentic way. Hold on, Helena's waiting.
Oh, Jonathan is going to be.
Okay. So in that receptivity, then something deeper becomes possible. And there's so many avenues in the wide world of theosophy. It really depends on what's needed, I think, what's called for. It can take many different forms and places depending on things. I think today, though, at least in my experience in teaching meditation for the last, especially last almost 20 years, with younger, you know, under age 40 is now younger, so they want something that they can do. And that activity is often very, very basic, you know, first steps into engaging in, I'll use the word mindfulness, so I don't like it, but present time awareness practice. Mindfulness is, just as an aside, the Pali word is sati, and really would be better translated as full attention, present time attention. They often even use the word retention now, as it has an aspect of memory about it. And unfortunately, in Western world, when we use the word mindfulness, we then think of it as some kind of concentrating mental activity, where it's a full body awareness, present time activity. So that is and that, you know, in whether it's Theravada or Mahayana Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism, this kind of basic sati practice is the gateway to experientially a great deal, everything else, really.
Yeah.
You know, Kim, do you have Kurt, another comment?
Kurt, yeah.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to suggest one possible response to David's very pertinent, profound question, and that is theosophy or theosophia is divine wisdom by definition, and that it is a teaching passed down through the ages and made available, much of it for the first time in the English language, by the efforts of great beings. And so we have this magnificent literature available to us. And by attempting to assimilate even a grain, a sand grain of the teaching, and using it to transform our lives, that we are assisting and aiding humanity in that way. And so that to the extent that even that grain or that drop of wisdom is garnered, our life becomes that much more purposeful and of aid and assistance to other beings. So even if one can't take in the whole thing, and one is not good at meditating, and et cetera, you can be a failure in all these ways. But if you can assimilate one grain, and in fact, this is what Raghavan says is the teaching of the Gita, the 18th chapter that's given to Arjuna. One drop will make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, even I totally think that's sometimes more true than theosophists give themselves credit for, even. So, for example, in 20th century world, Alfred Russel Wallace, is that the right Wallace? I get the two mixed up. The Vice President Wallace of the Roosevelt era was a theosophist. Actually, he had been a actual member earlier. While he didn't personally directly write the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, it was ideas that he actually seeded into the Washington, D.C. dialogue during the 1940s that it came out of. And if he hadn't been there and that had happened, it wouldn't have happened. It's very, very clear to see that. So we don't know who is carrying the future. It's really quite marvelous to look back historically. There are just only a handful, maybe I would say, so I was looking at this for a while, maybe 40 people between 1875 and 1950. 40 people, if you remove them, all of the tremendously positive change in interaction, for example, in creativity between East and West in the 1970s and 80s and on, would not have happened if you take those 40 people away. But those 40 people were only doing what they were doing. They weren't thinking, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to change things in 30, 40 years from now, or 100, or more. They had no idea. They were just doing what they were doing. Like Kirk said, they were just sharing and doing and imbibing these tiny drops, and sharing a little bit, D.T. Suzuki and his wife, Beatrice Lane, they had a theosophical lodge in Kyoto. It'd be like everyone coming here today. A handful of people would come. Then they went on, they did a little, then the Eastern Buddhist was born. I'm just using this as an example, and then he was invited to the Buddhist Society in London by the Buddhist theosophist Christmas Humphreys. And then his books were published in English starting then. And then hiatus, lost another decade with World War II. And then just in that particular avenue was a whole basis for the birth of a great deal of interest in Mahayana and Zen Buddhism. And there are other scholars with similar stories, and also non-scholars. This is not just about scholars, but I just use that as one example.
You've got 20 more minutes. I don't know how you're going to gauge your
I think we're doing well.
Now, one thing, Ken, that comes to mind with this question of what to offer a newcomer in the lodge. My sister here in the lodge, Desiree, likes to talk about the idea of speaking at a level that is very close to the audience so that they can relate to what you're talking about, and then you kind of big them up. I like the idea that Kurt was mentioning about the droplet, and it's just a little bit, so you're not going way ahead of them in terms of like abstract concepts, but able to be close enough to reach the audience that's coming in. So going back to this idea of Indra's net, that is, I would say, profoundly abstract.
Oh,
That it's profoundly abstract in terms of this interconnectedness and interdependence of everybody and everything in the manifested world.
yeah.
And then I think in the quote that I read at the beginning from the Zen master, he was using a capital S self and a lower S self. And I wonder if you could say something about these ideas about the little S self and the big S self. What are those?
Oh, yes. Also, that's used by Blavatsky in The Voice of the Silence.
Yes.
I mean, we have this progressive smaller and higher upper cases of self. And what does this mean? And again, we begin to get an experience of this gradually, not just conceptually. And again, you know, in my prosaic self, I'm going along, and all of a sudden, something triggers either within or out, and an aha moment. And then it's like, oh, so then the small self has allowed, it's opened or been touched by this greater self. I try to keep this as experiential as possible. Or if you have it in Abraham Maslow, the psychologist hierarchy, you know, you have the, he has this idea of this moments of breakthrough that happen. It's also in William James, you know, this experiential basis of mysticism. So this theosophic mysticism is very important to reinvigorate, I think. You know, and it's very real, you know. I was gonna, where is this? Again, this may seem rather, you know, but this was Blavatsky's experience, okay? So knowledge comes first, and we can scope this down to smaller. We all experience this in smaller or greater ways using our intuitive awakening. Knowledge comes in visions, first in dreams, and then in pictures presented to the inner eye during meditation. Thus have I been taught the whole system of evolution, the laws of being, and all else that I know, the mysteries of life and death, the workings of karma. Not a word was spoken to me of all this in the ordinary way, except perhaps by way of confirmation of what was thus given me. Nothing taught me in writing. And knowledge so obtained is so clear, so convincing, so indelible in the impression it makes upon the mind that all other sources of information, all other methods of teaching with which we are familiar dwindle into insignificance in comparison with this. One of the reasons why I hesitate to answer offhand some questions put to me is the difficulty of expressing in sufficiently accurate language things given to me in pictures and comprehended to me by the pure, capital R, reason, as Kant would call it. Theirs is a synthetic method of teaching. The most general outlines are given first, then an insight into the method of working. Next, the broad principles and notions are brought into view, and lastly begins the revelation of the minuter points. So personally, I really like especially her last sentence there is giving a way of approaching that the universal principles actually come first. And when one gets a feel and a sense for that, then details can follow in.
So that sounds familiar to the Platonic idea of deductive versus inductive reasoning, to go from the abstract to the particular, as opposed to the method of, say, Western science of the 1800s, 1900s, and this century, of going from particular minute details to then come up with more abstract laws. So I think modern Western science is going about it the opposite way.
Yeah, right. Correctly speaking, yes. Very universal deductive approach.
And that's what she means by a synthetic method.
Yeah.
And it starts from the Platonic abstract ideals and then to the particular.
Right. Yep. I totally agree. Yes.
And there's a book, a famous book in the 1930s, not Theosophy stuff, but I'll say it anyway here in the lodge. And that's Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. There's another one called Outwitting the Devil. And in both of those, he makes reference to something he calls infinite intelligence.
Oh,
And that inventors and people coming up with new patents meditate and get their ideas from infinite intelligence, not from any other source of knowledge. And so it seems like in this Blavatsky quote, she's talking about something along those lines, that it's not an ordinary from the bottom up way of knowing knowledge, but of approaching knowledge from a very different perspective or different view, use that view word. And that maybe by taking our finite little mind, little s self, little s mind, to get, in a sense, connected to the Indra's net, that this other knowledge can become apparent to us.
yeah. I think, giving ourselves the space and the silence to allow some of the deeper view to grow. Sometimes it takes quiet time.
And earlier you did have the question, how does one approach the higher mind? So that would be part of the methodology of using this silent meditation, like in Voice of the Silence.
Yeah, I think it goes again both together. There is inquiry and study with contemplation. The more unified they become, the more integrated these great ideas become, and the more alive.
Now, would you say, Ken, that it's who was I asking questions about the presentation? You mentioned things like chaos theory, and but going back to this major theme of Indra's net, it seems like it's a little bit hinted at by modern physical science in the West, with this idea of subatomic particles being entangled with each other at some level, and that it's really not just those elements of what we call physical reality or our manifested world, but really everything, in a sense, is interconnected.
Absolutely, I mean, it's in front of us, Like, think of the shift in view. It's like, I feel so separate because my body ends here, and then everything is separate over there. Or, oh my gosh, just touching this, I'm one with it. So actually, even the most physical part of us is connecting us with everything, let alone the more subtle energetic aspects where we are profoundly interconnected even more.
One analogy, as we speak of analogies, is the individual deluded separateness person is like a drop of water. And in their journeys through the spiritual path, or getting to what the title is here is a spiritual awakening, they can realize that they're really, say if they go back to the ocean, and a couple of us, we're actually physically in the ocean today,
Oh.
The drop of water doesn't cease to be a drop of water, but it all of a sudden takes on a much larger sense of identity as being not just connected to the ocean, but part of the ocean, but really the ocean. And it's no longer a drop, it's no longer separate, although it hasn't ceased to exist as water molecules in a physical analogy sense.
In the other presentation I nixed, I had a quote from a poem by Rumi where he actually takes your same image and he goes, actually the ocean's already in the drop.
They're within each other, yeah.
Which I kind of like, is cute too.
And that's how the poet can see the universe in a blade of grass.
Yes, yeah,
Because the
absolutely.
universe is already in the blade of grass.
Right, yeah.
And again, my colleague Desiree there, my sister at the lodge, she always likes to talk about fractals.
Fractals,
And,
yes.
and this idea that as when this Buddhist concept you're mentioning that there's multiple worlds of multiple Buddhas, as you look further and further into the golden hairs of the lion, that you see more and more lions. It's same similarity to fractals. And there's actually some mathematicians have a particular equation for fractals. And as you change the perspective, you see the same thing over and over again. So it seems like there's some Westerners that are beginning to get some clues at a cognitive level. But you make a distinction between cognition and words and things in a book versus the experience. And how are those different?
Well, I think it's exciting and it's really positive that there's this great rush to at least make an attempt to understand the interface between various forms of consciousness and the subtle neurophysiology of the body.
Yeah.
And certainly there are some important things that are discovered and are true. At the same time, I think it's a little bit overly self-inflated to think that we really know that much yet,
Right.
to put it mildly. So I think it'll grow, but the avenue will become more and more developed, you know. So again, the question was though, how?
Oh, this hubris of knowledge and words and books and encyclopedias and internets and AI, that hubris of concrete, data knowledge versus the experience.
Yeah, I mean,
that's something that's uniquely human, you might say.
Yes, it's uniquely human. I mean, it's very important to study and imbibe the nourishing spiritual drops of our tradition and learn from especially these paradigms and maps of consciousness. And then we take baby steps to actually taste this. It's possible, it's happening, it's changed the world, you know, so we continue from that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And without getting carried away, you know, I mean, it's like there's been a lot of overly exaggerated, self-inflated knowing through various kinds of so-called visionary experience that really we also have to have the firmness of following the path to not become distracted by these kinds of things either.
Hello. Oh yes, Hiro. Hello there, Hiro. A question or comment for us?
I have a question.
Far away.
I have a question. What is the mind?
Excellent question. So we have the Sanskrit word of manas, and Ken, take it away. It's like the big S self and the little s self. Yeah.
Manas depends on what direction you're going. What color is the mind? Big subject. This would be a whole nother several presentations, but the higher mind, we call buddhi manas. So this is the intrinsic, hardwired into our system. Aren't we fortunate? But we have this access to this higher intuitive, compassionate, wisdom center mind. And then we have this object desire oriented kama manasic mind.
Mhm.
And this plays hopefully back and forth and not just on one side. Big subject, yes, what is mind? But in the relative sense, mind arises, objectifies, internally or externally. Big subject, but we'll save that. Maybe Ken has something to add.
Well, just to add the one comment for Jairo is that the majority of modern, from the last century Western neuroscientists have this reductionistic, materialistic idea that mind arises from the complexity of our brain and our physiology, whereas the other people like Sir John Eccles in England have this ghost in the machine, that mind does not arise from our brain, but is something that comes through our brain. And I would say with the Hindu koshas, or even the septenary nature of man and the world, that Theosophy talks about, mind does not arise from the physical body at all. And that's, I think, the distinction with this Western science materialistic people. Would you agree with that, Ken?
And a psychologist friend of mine is very big into the latest neuroscience.
Yes.
So it's quite remarkable. Like, if can people see me moving here? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm moving my hand. I am moving my hand. This is completely delusional. This is not correct. It's proven, science now.
Yes.
The hand moves first, and then I'm moving my hand. It's a split second afterwards. So who is moving the hand? Oh, it's really wonderful that they're getting to that point.
So let's go in order. We have Marion Brown and then Kurt with some questions or comments. Marion, what do you have for us tonight?
Oh, I have a little question. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. In the talk, you mentioned the story of the reaction to the Dalai Lama's physician who'd been in jail in Tibet, and how did he find peace? And his answer was karma. So I think that question could be elaborated on even further in terms of from the point of view of karma. So my question is, if there's what about unmerited karma? And even though he could have said, well, I don't think I deserved this, but whether it was merited or unmerited, could the peace or the peace of mind come from not questioning it and knowing, or questioning it but still finding peace? And because regardless if it's merited or unmerited, the karma will work itself out.
So the question is exactly?
Well, that's my question. Because we do discuss the difference between karma and unmerited karma, as is written about in the. So
yes, this is a very big subject.
Yeah, so if he was to say the answer was, I found peace because karma, maybe he felt it was his karma, and he was at peace knowing that he would accept that. But most of us say, well, that seemed unmerited. I don't deserve to be in prison for 30 years. And yet, I'm wondering if you could say whether it's regardless if it's merited or unmerited, karma or finding peace with either or will still result in the appropriate karma eventually.
I think we're going to enter into a wonderful several-hour debate at this point. My understanding might be slightly different. Is everyone ready?
Yeah, what you got?
There's unmerited suffering. There's no unmerited karma.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I put the word in karma there, but I meant unmerited suffering.
Yeah. So the suffering. So yeah. Okay. So at least we're on the same page. So karma is absolute equilibrium of the universe in the big sense. And we have our individual relationship as we are personally engaging in how that karma works through us based on our own activity. So in that sense, he had total equanimity with, and just the look on his face was with great equanimity. And as often the Tibetans share not only compassion in his own personal sense, but compassion, like another very great Tibetan Lama, Garchen Rinpoche, said, he had to generate compassion for those who were torturing others in front of him, for their karma. His compassionate practice was, and it's not only for them torturing him, but them torturing those right in front of him. He had to have not dismissed the torture, he had to have full compassion for both. This is a very profound practice, but this is really happened, you know. So we can take that into our, you know, and in the current time, we must, you know, develop compassion for the whole situation. This is also very healing practice. I'm not sure I'm quite answering, but this is a very big subject. It would be great to have a seminar just on this subject, you know. So thank you for that.
I can get for a one sentence paraphrase that the Dalai Lama was after in prison for 30 years was given the opportunity to practice and strengthen his own capacity for karma within his personality life. Would you say that's part of the gift of being in prison for 30 years for him?
Or with the Garchen Rinpoche, very great Lama. With a few other Lamas, they actually end up being imprisoned with someone named Khenpo Munsal. He was considered one of the greatest in the Dzogchen tradition, masters of the century. And he conducted them through a retreat the entire time they were in prison. I had to smuggle them tiny little instructions written on toilet paper or whispered here or there. And when they all left, they all bowed to their Chinese jailers and thanked them for the retreat time.
Yes.
You know, this was a long time too. This was not a short.
Yeah, indeed. We have a comment or question from Kurt. Kurt, what do you have for us?
Oh, well, the wonderful comments, Ken. Let me be the first to thank you for your presentation and your responses to very difficult questions. I just make two very short comments because the time is ending. One is you would think that part of the dharma of a bodhisattva is they take responsibility for the karma of humanity as a whole, right? Theoretically, they no longer need to incarnate. They've completed the program, the human program. Do not need to incarnate, but voluntarily incarnate. And that means they take on the karma of humanity and are persecuted for it, right? This is the old story. So that's one comment. The other one is about mind and this discussion earlier about starting with universals. We just ran across this passage in Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge where students are asking her to explain further the stanzas. And she says that in actuality, the universal mind always is. And it just goes through periods of latency and activity. In Pralaya, the universal mind still is. in Manvantara, it's in activity. So in that sense, everything is composed of consciousness, right? That is part of the fundamental teaching. And we are that that same universal consciousness reflected in what we think is in a separate being, but through that process, the universe is coming to a greater knowledge of itself. Is one way to think about it. But thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Kirk. Those are great comments. Yep.
Yes,
The
indeed.
universe is, and through our human growth, it's more and more aware of itself, as it always is. Later this year, we will continue this subject. We actually only got through even 1/3 of what I thought today, but it's such a good subject, and I hope to do a series later and even an in-place retreat over this, possibly in Ojai. Thank you, anyway. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Wonderful. Thank you.
Take a pitch for next week.
Yeah, let me pop up to the screen here, and for
An almanac right there, you can see what it is behind you,
I was going to look on the
the other way, the other box there.
yeah. And with that, thank you all, and goodbye for today.
Thanks again, Kim. That was really fine.